Cheshu, Chef Matthew here in the studio. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing on this rainy day?
I'm doing okay. 사실 이 빗소리가 약간 집중력을 키우는 그런 효과가 있어요.
그렇죠. It's good for falling asleep as well.
That's true. It's that white noise.
Yes.
백색 소음이라고 하죠. What about you? Are you a good focuser, concentrator?
On things like white noise, yes. Like, and even more so, like things like just conversations going on in the background, cafes, that sort of thing. That's where I'm the best. Can't do music.
You don't 엿들어? You don't eavesdrop when I hear conversations?
No, I think the problem is with music is that the beat kind of captures you, right?
Right.
And then so I'm hooked onto that. But if it's something that's just kind of random and organic going on around me, that's when I think I can focus the best.
그러니까 흥이 많으신 분들은 음악을 들으면 절대로 집중을 못해요.
I just start dancing right
That's
there.
right. Well, we are talking about food today, so hopefully our listeners and ourselves, we can focus in on what you prepared for us.
That's right. Today's show is actually a little bit more of a lesson, and it's one that I can't believe we haven't done yet. But I want to talk about some cooking words because I think the words that we use when we talk about cooking can kind of get lost in translation, especially when we're talking between English and Korean.
Okay.
I think there's a little bit of confusion on what certain words mean, so let's clarify some of that today.
All right. Well, before we begin, since we are talking about cooking, 오늘의 2부 퀴즈도 아닌 질문입니다. We're just asking our listeners, 우리 지니님들, 최근 요리한 음식은 무엇인가요? What's something that you cooked up at home that you're proud of? 사진과 함께 샵 1013으로 담은 50원, 장문 100원, 유료 문자 보내주시면 가장 멋진 사진을 보내주신 분에게 커피 쿠폰 드리고 있으니까요.
We're giving them a bit of a break
Yeah.
because there's no wrong answers for this
맞아요.
quiz. They can submit anything they'd like.
오답도 없기 때문에 틀린 그런 게 없기 때문에 그냥 자신 있는 사진, 자신 있는 메뉴 보내주시면 커피 쿠폰 드리겠습니다. Alright, let's get started.
Right. So let's talk about the words that we use when we were preparing food, when we're getting ready to to start cooking. One thing they say about Korean food, and it's one of the reasons why you don't really see a lot of like the expensive hotels here in Korea have Korean restaurants. 한식은 손이 많이 간다.
손이 많은 가는 음식이 굉장히 많죠.
It's work that's extremely prep intensive. A lot of chopping, a lot of kind of pre-preparation before you even get to the cooking part. So that's what we're going to focus on in the first part. And you know what they say, you can't start cooking until you start using that knife and cutting things up, chopping things up. So the most basic term for slicing is 썰다.
썰다, 썰어.
Right. So this means both chopping and slicing, and there is a distinction there. And so while in English we have two separate words for cutting, chopping, and slicing.
Sure.
In Korean, we'll generally use 썰다 and we'll put something in front of that. So for example, we're like 얇게 썰다, so to slice thinly.
Sure.
Or 네모꼴로 썰다, to cube. Or 채를 썰다, 채 썰다. That means to julienne or to shred and to turn into these fine little strips, which is what so much of Korean food is. It doesn't look fussy from the outside, but really there's a lot of knife work that goes into Korean food.
That's true. And that's why, I mean, around the world as well, food, we say that you can tell how much love is, in this food based on the preparation.
And you know what? I think love in food is a real thing. It's like a measurable thing. I think when people talk about love, they're talking about attention, right? How much care exactly is put into a dish. But like on the other side of 썰다 too, you also have 자르다. And there's a distinction there to be made.
Right, because I mean, you talked about cut as well.
Exactly.
So we could say like 가위로 자르다.
Exactly. So they can be used interchangeably in some instances, but other times there is that slight distinction there. And then of course there's 다지다. 다진 마늘 is something that we use a lot of in Korean.
Yes.
And that would be most closely translated to, of course, minced. A really, really fine chop on something.
That's right. But I feel like garlic or like ginger, like 다진, 그런 거는 it's kind of like mushed as well.
Yeah, basically.
Mushed, minced.
Which is a great segue to our next word, 으깨다.
으깨다.
It's almost an onomatopoeia, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's a new one for me.
Yeah, it's to crush something. So you can use a mortar and pestle to 으깨 certain things. You could 으깨 your 마늘, or you could 다져 your 마늘.
Okay.
You can crush it or you could mince it. And
Okay.
there are differences, but I think that's being a little bit pedantic there. But essentially, whenever you want to talk about like crushing something,
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the mortar and pestle. So if you do like 참깨.
exactly.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
웃기다.
This is not the word that you use to crush your enemies, but however your ingredients,
That's
you
right.
could 웃겨.
You think of your enemies while you're crushing them.
And then next we have 데치다, which is, I think, an important step in a lot of Korean cuisine, especially when it comes to preparing things like 나물.
Right.
Yeah, so 데치다, it means the English word for that is to blanch, and it just means to briefly plunge into boiling water. Oftentimes, you'll kind of put into ice water to make it stop cooking. But what you're doing is that you're just very briefly cooking something.
Right. And it's, I mean, I've watched a lot of cooking shows and they say it's purely to kind of enhance the flavor and the
Sure.
color as
Right.
well. Is there anything to add?
Well, so one thing that's really cool. One of the reasons why things like green, so 시금치, for example, right?
Yeah.
When it goes in, it gets brighter in color, right? It becomes kind of deeper and greener. One of the reasons for that is because right on the kind of the edge of the skin, right on the surface of it, there's this kind of layer of oxygen that's trapped between there. And so when you're cooking those greens, it releases those gases, and all of a sudden it just becomes kind of brighter. So imagine kind of like having like a film like over like a bowl of soup, right? And then it kind of gets like cloudy and steamed up. But once that film touches the soup, you can see right through it.
This is like 과학적인 설명.
That's why we're giving them a break on the quiz today.
Yeah, this is intense. This is great. 데치다, to blanch.
To blanch.
There you go.
That's right. And all this, of course, goes into different types of prep. The next word may sound like it's a word for prep, but it's actually a very specific type of prep.
Is it?
손질하다.
I was going to say that this kind of covers all prep.
Right?
Yeah.
So 손질하다 usually almost always refers to when you're 잡어잉
Working
고기?
with your hands.
고기 or 생선
그렇죠, 그렇죠.
when you're trimming meat or fish.
맞아요.
So they also say 고기를 잡다. Like you're catching it in a sense. But so when you're trimming, taking off all the excess fat, the skin off of it, that's 손질하다.
That's right. 그래서 노량진 뭐 어떤 수산시장 같은 데 가면 손질을 하시는 분들이 따로 있기 때문에 so you can go to these fish markets and you'll buy your fish and you'll wonder, oh, how can I do this? But they'll cut up things that needs to be cut. They'll break things that needs to be cut and take out all the guts for you and just make it easy for you to eat.
One of the best reasons to kind of visit like your local butchers or your fish dealers in your area.
Yeah.
Of course, all the big box stores have them, but making that personal connection also means that you might be able to take a little work off your hands and they'll
That's
be willing
right.
to do it for you.
특히 할머니분들이 이런 걸 잘 해주죠.
That's right.
For their granddaughters and grandsons. 손질 다 해가지고 가시.
exactly.
안 먹게. Oh, I miss my harmony. All right, let's move on.
All right, so next we have to make a distinction between a couple of words, and that's 깎다 versus 까다.
Okay, I know 깎다.
Yeah.
Like 과일 깎다, 사과
깎다.
깎다.
But what do you do for 귤?
까다?
까다.
그러네요.
Yeah, so when you're kind of shaving something, it's 깎다. And that's also the word that you would use for shaving too, right?
수염을 깎다.
수염 깎다.
그러네요.
Which I don't, but if I would, if I weren't so lazy.
To shave it. Oh, that's interesting.
Exactly. So you're shaving it.
Because essentially in English you'll say, peel.
Peel.
But that's more for oranges.
But you use the word like you peel a potato as well. It's
Yeah.
all one word.
Yeah.
But we distinguish between the two. Which
Interesting.
And 까다 is usually for things that you'll use your hands to kind
Yeah.
of peel off.
There you go.
And then you could also use 벗기다 as well, which is more of a very general term just to kind of take off the peel.
Take it off.
Yep. And then we have 반죽하다, which is an interesting one. It means not just means to prepare a dough or a batter, but it could also mean to knead that dough as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny word, right? Because in English the translation would be to dough. Which
To dough.
To dough. It makes sense.
To dough or
To
not to dough? 반죽을 할까? 반죽.
That was terrible.
Well, if you are just joining us now, we have lots of words to cover when it comes to cooking, when it comes to prepping, and we'll continue on, but we do have some messages. 와, 정말 멋진 사진들이 많이 보내주시는 것 같은데요. 2450님께서는 두부 우엉 조림. 두부 지지고 간장 조청 우엉 넣고 조리다가 고추 넣고 먹으면 꿀맛이죠. 라고 보내주셨는데요. Wow. 우엉, interesting. I'm not a huge fan of 우엉. Like I won't buy it to make it at home. 근데 식당에서 먹으면 다 먹어요.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I love
think
one.
that kind of stuff has a lot of 정서 and
Yeah.
too much work for me. 6018님께서 평소 요리하는 걸 좋아하는 남자입니다. 썸씨 부려봤어요? 라고 보내주셨는데 wow! Is that 전? 전도 굉장히 정서 있는 음식이잖아요.
Not only is there chun, there's 3 bottles of wine for a Monday dinner.
That's true.
They're going all out.
2 glasses. I think, what is that? There's like some wrap and jjigae and 생선. I mean, not 생선 is, I don't know, the shrimp and asparagus. Wow. Definitely, as you said, it's a huge party.
I think they're about to invite us over.
Yeah.
It is.
We'll be over at 9 p.m. All right, let's continue on. 여러분들도 최근 요리한 음식 무엇인가요? 사진과 함께 샵 1013으로 단문 50원, 장문 100원, 유료 문자 보내주시면 가장 멋진 사진을 보내주신 분에게 커피 쿠폰을 드리고 있기 때문에요. 많이 많이 보내주세요. 오늘 저녁 식사 메뉴도 포함이기 때문에 인증샷 한번 보내주세요. All right. Now we talked a lot about prepping when it comes to cutting using our knives as well. How about just the difference between 요리 and 조리?
That's a good one, I think. I think there's a distinction there that's not kind of as clear-cut as the dictionary would make it out to be, because the dictionary would say that 요리 is kind of the more art side of cooking, and
Is it
조리,
cuisine?
yes, cuisine, and 조리 is like the act of cooking. It's more mechanical, but I don't know. I think more in everyday life, you talk about 집에서 요리한다, and I don't
그렇죠.
think that necessarily always connotes that there's a very artistic element to it.
맞아요.
Yeah, I think
그래서,
요리 is like the catch-all term.
Yeah, I mean, 집에서 요리해요? 라고 if you ask somebody that, it's like, ooh, do you cook fancy cuisines at home?
Yeah, do you engage in the culinary arts? It's not quite that, right? So I think it's more that 요리 is the much more the kind of the catch-all term, and 조리 is when you want to kind of denote the more kind of mechanics of it.
Okay.
Yeah, the more technical side, especially when you're talking about in the kind of a restaurant setting. I think where the distinction is probably the most clear is when you're talking about 요리사 versus 조리사. And that's when they want to kind of distinguish between like a chef and a cook.
And a chef. There you go. There you go. Well, I don't know if a cook and a chef will know the difference between 익히다. I'm sure everybody will.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love how this word is used for these two uses, in that it could be used for something cooked all the way through. 고기가 익혔다, like the meat is cooked all the way through. But it also refers to when something is ripened.
잘 익었어. 잘 익었어.
Yeah, so it just all means like it's all ready to eat. It's there's the French actually have a term for this, à point. To the point, like it's right there at
On
the
point.
point. On
there
point.
you go.
So next we have 삶다, which is usually means to boil, but it could also refer to steaming as well. And I think this is something where you also have kind of different definitions of steaming in English.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because we don't say 삶은 만두.
Right.
We say 찐만두.
찐만두. So 삶다, 찌다, boil, and steam.
Okay.
So those 4 words in both, those 2 words in each of the languages, there's a little bit of crosstalk between all of the terms.
Right.
But essentially, we're always kind of talking about this kind of wet, gentle cooking method, right? It's something that's kind of that is kind of water based. And it cooks something generally pretty gently.
I mean, even for steam buns as well, they're quite delicate enough to just break apart with the weakest of your fingers, and it's I guess fragile to cook as well, because you don't want to handle it with like tongs. Do you handle your mandu with tongs?
I got 10 tongues right here.
Just your fingers. Isn't it difficult? I mean, don't you burn yourself?
I think I've burned myself too much. I've lost all. Actually, not funny. A slightly tragic story. Not only do I have almost no sensation in my fingertips anymore, for about 8 to 10 years of my life, kind of during the peak of my career, I had no feeling in my toes either.
Oh my goodness.
Just because standing all day long, I just I cut off the circulation to my feet.
Yeah.
I just walked around all day long with numb toes.
That's right.
It's a bizarre feeling. I'm glad that I got better.
뭐 요리사분들도 그렇고 조리사분들도 그렇고 주부님들도 그렇고 요리 많이 하시는 분들은 진짜 손가락에 아무런 느낌이 없을 것 같아요. It'll
That's
just be numb. And so we respect anybody who will put food in front of us and feed us, really.
All right. So next we're going to so we've talked about a couple of kind of wet, gentle cooking methods. And we have 부치다, which is to cook in oil. And this is where we get the term 부침개 from. So you might know this as the other term for 전.
Yeah, and I always refer to it as 부침개, but then I came to Korea and they were like 전. And I was like, what's the difference?
So there's an interesting distinction. So 부침개 it's a Seoul term.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a Seoul term, and it refers to generally was it anything that you kind of cook in oil, right? So like 부치다. One of the reasons why 전 refers to both the pancake style of 전 and the individual bite-sized pieces, that sort of style of 전, is because 전 refers to the fact that it's been dredged in flour and then cooked in oil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's how those two kind of come together.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah, so you talk about 전을 부치다 or 부침개를 부치다. And 부침개, that's a term that just means a thing that is fried.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I'm learning something. 부침개가 서울 term인지도 몰랐는데요. Let's talk about more about frying when it comes to 볶다 and 튀기다 as well, because that's with oil too.
Yeah, and this is also a one that there's a lot of confusion thrown in there because a lot of times both of them are translated as to fry. And even within English as well, I've noticed that was it American style English versus like British style English. They'll talk about, frying something, whereas you might hear in American English sautéing something. So to kind of like stir fry or to toss in a pan.
Yeah.
And so that's the real distinction between was it 볶다 and 튀기다. 튀기다 is deep frying.
Sure.
Completely submerged in oil where it becomes nice and crispy. 볶다 refers to pan frying. But not necessarily, but then again, too, pan frying in American English means two things. Yeah, it could mean to stir fry, but to pan fry, you could also 구워 in a pan too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I mean, we are running out of time, but hopefully we barely scratched the surface when it comes to cooking words, but maybe this could be a start of the series.
I think we got enough for another episode.
Yeah, well, there you go. Before we let you go, we did have our question of the day, which was to send some photos that you guys have cooked along the way. 0047님께서는 been spending a lot of time at home due to the pandemic and was craving pigs in a blanket and so made some for the first time. 그래서 사진까지도 보내주셨는데요. Pigs in a blanket이라고 하면 약간 미니 헛도그인데요. Wow, that's really impressive. That's really impressive. I really like that one. 8414님께서는 최근에 한 요리 중에 제일 마음에 드는 비주얼이에요. 돼지 등갈비를 간장 소스에 재웠다가 에어프라이어로 익혔어요. 라고 보내주셨는데요. Wow, I think that's been like a huge hit. For the pandemic was the air fryer.
It's a game changer, especially if you don't have an oven at home. It's a complete game changer.
There you 고구마도 다 그런 데에서 굽고. I love hamburger. 6039님께서도 wow, 햄버거도 보내주셨는데 직접 만든 수제 햄버거.
That looks like that's a good looking homemade hamburger.
That's a restaurant style burger right there. 3656님께서는 오징어 순대. 와우! 버섯, 양파, 당근, 다진 고기, 찹쌀을 볶아 소를 만들고 속을 파낸 통 오징어에 전부 가루로 코팅한 다음에 소를 넣고 꼬지로 터지지 않게 꿰맨 다음에 수채 넣고 쪄 좋아요. 손 오징어 말만하기지만 말 많이 가지만 너무 맛있습니다.
Wow, then they did it right. They really put in a lot of care, and they,
Yeah.
you know, they did all the steps that you do that like a restaurant would take
Yeah.
to do that. That's a pro level 오징어 순대 right there.
그러니까 이런 걸 직접 해 먹어보니까 왜 그렇게 비싸게 파는지도 알겠죠.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Start appreciating those restaurants and things like that. 제일 멋진 것 같은데요. 커피 쿠폰 드리겠습니다. Congrats to 3656님. 와우, 이건 또 뭡니까? Is this UK? 비주얼.
6 times.
Yeah. 0728님. 비주얼은 그냥 그렇지만 저희 집 두 아들 최애 메뉴인 육회입니다.
I don't know what she's talking about. That looks delicious.
That
to me.
does.
That looks
비주얼.
so good.
너무 괜찮은데요. 이제 육회 양념은 눈 감고도 할지경이에요 라고 보내주셨는데요. Are you a fan of 육회?
I love UK.
Okay.
I love UK. In fact, I might crave UK more than I do like 생선회 most of the time.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I absolutely love UK.
그렇죠. 영어로는 beef tartare.
Beef tartare, that's
Okay.
right.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of UK. I think I ate it a couple times. 근데 진짜 정서인 게 밑에 그 배가 쓴 거를
Sure.
봤어요. And
It's
so
all about
that's-
that contrast,
It
right?
is.
The sweet, light, crispy versus the chewy, salty meat. Oh, it's so good.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for our listeners sending in your messages. Hopefully you guys enjoy your coffee coupons as well. Thank you once again, Chef Matt. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure.